When I visited my mother, she's 75 now, I opened her refrigerator and saw something that looked perfectly normal at first. Rows of everyday groceries, all packed into the cold like they always had been. But something about it felt wrong. Not because the food looked spoiled, not because the fridge malfunctioned, but because I suddenly realized several of the items inside that refrigerator shouldn't have been there at all. She looked at me and said the same sentence millions of people say every day. The fridge keeps things fresh, right? And in that moment, I knew she had no idea that some of the most common things we put in the fridge, things she eats every single week, are actually harmed, not helped by the cold. Not many people do. Most of us grew up believing cold equals safe, without ever learning the science hiding behind it, or what the cold really does to certain foods once the door closes. But here's the shock. These 9 foods are the ones that should almost never be refrigerated. Not because of taste alone, because cold temperatures can damage their natural enzymes, increase sugars, dull antioxidants, or make them spoil faster. For example, in 2016, researchers at the University of Florida found that simply chilling tomatoes below 54 degrees Fahrenheit shuts down over 300 flavor-producing genes permanently. That's why chilled tomatoes turned watery and tasteless. Linda, 62, had the same problem. She kept potatoes, onions, and tomatoes in the fridge for years and wondered why they always became mushy, sweet, or weirdly bland. The truth hits hard. Some foods weren't designed for the cold at all. And once you know which foods they are, suddenly the refrigerator isn't just a safe space. It's a place where certain foods quietly break down. And this breakdown isn't only about flavor. Some of these cold-triggered changes are far more concerning than most people over 50 ever realize. I once worked with a 68-year-old retired engineer named Robert. Healthy weight, active, careful with his food, but his energy kept crashing in the afternoon, and his digestion had become unpredictable. He couldn't figure out why. Nothing in his diet had changed, except one thing. Every single morning, he was eating foods that had been quietly altered in his refrigerator. Not spoiled, not expired, just changed. And here's the chilling part. The change wasn't visible. It didn't smell bad, it didn't look wrong, but inside the cells of those foods, the cold had triggered chemical shifts that he never could have noticed. In 2015, a research team at the University of Idaho uncovered something surprisingly simple. When certain everyday foods are kept in cold temperatures, their natural starches and enzymes can transform into something completely different, sometimes tripling their sugar levels in just 2 weeks. Robert wasn't eating more sugar, he was unknowingly generating it inside his own groceries. That's when it clicked. The refrigerator wasn't making his food safer, it was making it different. And for people over 50 who rely on stable digestion, steady energy, and anti-inflammatory nutrients, those differences matter a lot. The cold wasn't hurting him directly, it was quietly reshaping the very foods he trusted. But the story doesn't end with fear. Because once you understand why this happens, the solution turns out to be surprisingly simple and surprisingly empowering. The warm wisdom principle. Not long after I learned about Robert's situation, I visited my grandmother. She's 94 now, sharp, funny, and still cooks every single day. And what struck me wasn't her age, it was her kitchen. Room temperature baskets, open-air shelves, sunlight, but not too much. A gentle kind of warmth you only find in older homes. And the thing is, she's been keeping certain foods outside the fridge her entire life. Not because she read a study, not because she follows trends, but because she learned from her mother, who learned from her mother long before refrigerators existed. What she didn't know, and what science is only now confirming, is that some foods were never designed for cold. They're activated by air, warmth, and natural enzymes, not shut down by them. In 2020, a team at UC Davis found that when one specific everyday food was stored at room temperature instead of in the refrigerator, it maintained nearly double its natural protective compounds, compounds linked to heart health and immune defense. Double, just by staying out of the cold. It suddenly made sense why my grandmother's meals always tasted brighter, fuller, more alive. She wasn't doing anything special. She was simply letting the foods operate in the environment nature intended. And the best part? Once you understand this principle, you can bring back the flavor, texture, and nutrients of certain foods without spending a single dollar. No supplements, no gadgets, just a small shift in where you place them. And when people try this simple shift, even for just a few days, the difference can be surprisingly obvious. The 7-day shift, the 9 foods that come back to life outside the fridge.
Judith, 71, decided to try a simple experiment. Take 9 common foods out of her refrigerator and keep them in a cool, dry corner for 1 week. What surprised her wasn't just how much better they tasted, but how her digestion, energy, and sense of satisfaction noticeably improved. Here's why each food changed so dramatically outside the cold. 1. Tomatoes. Tomatoes lose their natural flavor and firmness when chilled because cold temperatures disrupt the enzymes responsible for ripening. A 2016 University of Florida study found that refrigeration shuts down over 300 genes linked to taste and aroma. That's why tomatoes become grainy and bland. Keeping them at room temperature allows their natural sugars and acids to remain balanced, preserving both texture and nutrients. 2. Potatoes. Potatoes undergo a chemical shift in the fridge. Their starches convert into sugars much faster. A 2015 University of Idaho study showed this increase can reach up to 300% in just 2 weeks. When cooked, these sugars may form acrylamide, a compound linked to digestive and inflammatory stress. Storing potatoes in a dark, cool pantry, not the refrigerator, keeps their starch profile stable and their texture firm. 3. Onions. Onions don't tolerate moisture well. The refrigerator's high humidity causes their papery skins to soften and encourages mold growth between the layers. Cold also breaks down cell walls, making onions mushy and difficult to slice. Room temperature storage, preferably in a ventilated basket, keeps onions dry, crisp, and naturally protected. They maintain their sharp flavor longer and resist spoilage far better outside the fridge. 4. Garlic. Garlic loses much of its natural potency when chilled. A 2020 UC Davis study found that refrigeration diminishes its allicin content, a key compound for flavor and immune support, by nearly half within 10 days. Cold also makes garlic sprout prematurely, which creates bitterness and weakens its aroma. Keeping garlic in a dry, breathable space helps it stay firm, flavorful, and medicinally active longer. 5. Bananas. Bananas are tropical fruits, and cold temperatures cause what scientists call chilling injury. Their cells rupture, The peel turns black, and vitamin C drops sharply. Refrigeration also stops the natural ripening process, leaving the fruit tasteless or overly soft. At room temperature, bananas ripen gradually, developing their full sweetness and nutrient profile. Cold should only be used once they're fully ripe, never before. 6. Avocados. Avocados don't ripen properly in the fridge. Cold slows the enzyme activity needed for softening and increases fat oxidation, which leads to off flavors. The result is a rubbery or watery texture. Avocados should be ripened at room temperature first, only then can they be refrigerated for a short time. This helps preserve their creamy consistency and heart-healthy fats. 7. Bread. Bread becomes stale 6 times faster in the refrigerator. The cold accelerates starch retrogradation, where starch molecules crystallize and push out moisture. That's why refrigerated bread tastes dry and crumbly. Storing bread at room temperature keeps it soft and aromatic longer. For longer preservation, the freezer is a better option than the fridge because it halts staling without damaging texture. 8. Honey. Honey naturally preserves itself, and refrigeration disrupts that balance. Cold temperatures cause rapid crystallization, making honey gritty and difficult to scoop. Moisture inside the fridge can also enter the jar and dilute its antimicrobial properties. At room temperature, honey stays smooth, stable, and shelf-safe indefinitely thanks to its natural enzymes and low water content. 9. Coffee beans. Coffee beans are extremely porous and absorb moisture and odors inside the fridge. Each time the door opens, temperature shifts create condensation that damages their aromatic oils. The Specialty Coffee Association reports that beans can lose up to 60% of their aroma after a week of refrigeration. Keeping them in an airtight, opaque container at room temperature preserves both freshness and flavor. Your 3-day pantry reset starts today. Now that you know the truth behind these 9 foods, you can make a simple shift that transforms the way you eat and the way your body feels without changing a single recipe. Just 3 days. That's all it takes to start noticing clearer flavors, smoother digestion, and a sense that your meals feel alive again. Start by moving these foods, tomatoes, potatoes, onions, garlic, bananas, avocados, bread, honey, and coffee beans, out of the refrigerator and into a cool, dry part of your kitchen. You don't need new containers, new tools, or new habits. Just let them sit in the environment they were designed for. As you cook over the next few days, pay attention. Does the flavor return? Does your digestion feel easier? Do your meals satisfy you more? Many people over 50 tell me they notice these changes surprisingly fast, sometimes within a single meal. And if you try this, I'd love for you to share your experience. Tell me which food surprised you the most. Tell me if your bread stayed softer, if your bananas ripened better, or if your tomatoes finally tasted like tomatoes again. Your kitchen can become a healthier place with one small decision today. Start your 3-day pantry reset and let your food come back to life.